So once again, we are delighted to have you join our June Community Impact Briefing. So thanks for being here. My name is Raquel Reddy, the Managing Director of Community Development for NCST. And it is, of course, not the beginning of June, but I've been told it is the start of the summer. For folks here like me in Florida, it has felt like summer for the last 2 weeks. But happy summer to everyone. And also, without mentioning, it is also the National Homeownership. June also represents the National Homeownership Month, and boy, do we have a lot to talk about and share with you regarding homeownership strategies. Today, we have a wonderful guest speaker who my colleague Chris Garland is going to be introducing. So I'm going to just take a second to introduce you, Chris Garland, who's our Community Development Manager based in Cleveland, Ohio. And Chris, you can take it away and we'll get started with our guest.
Well, thanks so much, Raquel, and happy Homeownership Month to you, and happy start of summer as well. I'm so glad to be able to join. I'm so glad all of you, are able to join us today for what should certainly be an engaging discussion and presentation, and thrilled to be introducing our presenter, Dorothy York, Vice President of Real Estate with Axe Housing in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Axe is a longtime NCST partner, and for much of that time, Dorothy has been leading the charge to innovate and create affordable housing and home ownership opportunities for low and moderate income families in Milwaukee. And with that in mind, today's presentation will dive into the Homeownership Acquisition Fund, which Axe Housing has designed to help compete with out-of-state investors who've been purchasing properties in weak market neighborhoods, a challenge that so many of our NCST partners have been experiencing throughout the country. So with that in mind, let me share a bit about our presenter. Dorothy York has over 20 years experience providing functional oversight, management, and thought leadership across a number of industries, including real estate, but also in healthcare and technology services. Her experience in these roles has helped Dorothy develop an extensive background in acquisition integrations, strategy implementation, change management, and process optimization using Six Sigma methodologies. Dorothy spent the majority of her career at Johnson Controls, where she received numerous promotions and awards, last serving as Human Resources Director for the service division there. Prior to joining Axe Housing, she spent 2 years as Director of Human Resources for the Kenosha Community Health Center, which is a $12 million nonprofit federally qualified community health center. Dorothy serves on the Board of Directors of Christ the King Baptist Church, Samaritan Project, Inc., and past president of the Executive Women's Golf Association of Milwaukee. Dorothy received her Bachelor of Science in Business Administration from Alverno College and her MBA at Concordia University, Wisconsin. She lives in Milwaukee, enjoys playing golf and spending time with friends and family. Dorothy York, thank you for being here. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that today is your birthday. So happy birthday. Thanks again for joining us. And I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Thanks so much, Chris. And thanks for that really great introduction. And I'm really happy to be here. I've prepared a presentation. And if it's okay with everyone, I'd like to kind of go through those presentation slides with you. And then we'll open it up and hopefully if you have questions, I'm able to answer those for you. So Raquel, keep me on track here. Let me know if people can see my presentation okay.
Looks good.
Everything looks good.
All right, good. So hello and welcome. I'm hoping that as part of this presentation, you will get a really good picture of Axe Housing, who we are as an organization, because I think that's going to help you to understand why this acquisition fund was a natural next step for Axe Housing. The initiative started in partnership with the Community Development Alliance, which is a collaboration of local neighborhood groups, housing nonprofits, and government entities that met to create Milwaukee's collective affordable housing plan. The plan addresses all phases of affordable housing, from rentals, new builds, homeless prevention, and rehabbing existing housing stock. So the Axe Board of Directors endorsed the plan, and Axe Housing serves as the lead partner for the acquisition fund strategy. The existing acquisition fund is or I should say the goal of the acquisition fund is to find and acquire existing housing inventory to keep homeownership affordable to Milwaukee's LMI families. So Axe Housing's vision is empowerment through homeownership, and our vision is to create vibrant neighborhoods through homeownership here in Milwaukee. We make it possible for families with barriers to homeownership, whether that barrier is credit, savings, or language, to become homeowners. So the roots of Axe Housing can be traced all the way back to the early 1990s. A visionary priest named Father Dennis Lewis noticed a growing number of Southeast Asian refugees landing in Milwaukee and joining his parish, which offered services among other languages. Now, if you think about it, it's painful to imagine, but put yourself in the shoes of the refugees. You're fleeing a situation terrible enough that you drop everything, bring only what you can carry, and walk, ride, sail, or fly to wherever you can get to there where you're no longer in danger. You may or may not have cash, gold, silver, etc. to carry. It's likely your bank account will not exist after you leave the country if you ever had one. Anything you worked hard to build in your life, a home, a career, is being left behind. Your experience doesn't count when it comes to getting a job or home now in your new location. The reason we call Father Dennis visionary is this. He thought, what if instead of pointing refugee families toward temporary shelters and subsidized rentals, they could become homeowners using their experience and need to stabilize the neighborhood around the church. And so that's how Axe Housing was born. And it started really with Father Dennis's vision, and then he went to talk to the mayor of Milwaukee. At the time, it was John Norquist, with a request. He wanted families to be given an opportunity to purchase abandoned properties in the neighborhood surrounding the church for very low prices. The parish members would help the families fix them up. And so Mayor Norquist sent Father Dennis to the Department of City Development and told him, pick the person you want to help. And this is all legend of Axe, right? He walked into the office, he looked around at all the people at the desks. He noticed one empty desk and asked, who sits here? Another employee replied, this is John Worm's desk, but he's out in the neighborhoods. You'll never catch him here. That was exactly who Father Dennis was looking for. And so after tracking John down and sharing his idea, Axe Housing was born. So there are 4 key components to what make Axe Housing unique. After completing our online orientation, families and individuals are paired with a homebuyer coach. Together, they take a look at their finances and create an individual plan to get them to pre-approval, whether that is with a traditional lender or Axe Lending. If they're looking to purchase a move-in ready home, that would be done with a traditional lender. Or they have the option of purchasing a distressed property, such as a city foreclosure, and in that case, they would get a loan from Axe Lending. Axe Lending is our affiliate nonprofit that makes loans for distressed properties for home purchase and rehab. This opportunity makes it possible for families who might not qualify for a loan with a traditional lender or who want to put some sweat equity into their home and have equity once they move in. Once a family has been pre-approved for a home loan, they will work with an Axe real estate agent to find a home that will meet their needs. If a family has made a decision to purchase a distressed home, they will work with one of our home rehab coaching team. Our home rehab coaches will do the initial walkthrough of a distressed home and give an idea of how much the rehab will cost for the family. They then help the family navigate, coordinating, and executing their rehab plan. They help review proposals from qualified contractors and assist with the project management from start to finish. So they don't leave the family alone because this is brand new for them. and they need support throughout the process. And so by now, I'm sure it's clear why we need to equip families with better options than expensive substandard rentals. What likely isn't clear yet is what we can do about it. So 27 years later, let me introduce you to the ACTS team. This is a diverse group of individuals, compassionate and skilled colleagues who surround the family with to support their journey towards successful homeownership. This team is greater than 70% people of color with vast language skills and meets the needs of our communities. So since our inception, we've had 3,500 families purchase homes with ACTS support. In 2022, nearly 1,400 people started ACTS Homebuyer Virtual Orientation, which speaks to the demand for homeownership of those families. 500 have moved into the coaching program. As you can see from the demographics of the 2,000 individuals who are enrolled with us, we're reaching our target demographics, and we're focused on creating more homeowners among people of color. Last year, 310 families purchased homes for owner occupancy. This year, we're on track to beat that record, and we certainly are hoping that we do. So why do we think that the acquisition fund was the right way to go? So 40% of Milwaukee's entry-level home inventory is being bought up by investors. Our families were working with us and doing the hard work with their finances, only to find that the housing inventory was so low, they just couldn't find a home within their budget. Even if they did, they were often being outbid by out-of-state landlords and developers and losing the house that they had set their heart on. Now faced with a growing land grab by predatory investors, ACTS has formed a new social enterprise to further its mission. With 40% of Milwaukee's entry-level home inventory being purchased by investors, the ACTS Homeownership Acquisition Fund will reverse this trend by purchasing homes that would otherwise be purchased by investors and preserving them for homeowners. So Milwaukee right now is losing 1,000 homeowners of color every year, a pace that has persisted over the past decade. Families of low to moderate income are increasingly rent burdened and forced to make impossible trade-offs that limit their ability to experience upward mobility and participate in the American dream. As this graphic shows, homeownership among whites dipped a little during the economic downturn of 2010, but among people of color, there was a dramatic decline on homeownership. Some of the issues with the severity of the loss among people of color is also related to systemic racism, as people of color were the target of the subprime loans that drove the downturn. But our overall approach as an organization proves that homeownership is achievable and it's sustainable. Why should you own your home? Because renting is unsustainable. The average homeowner is paying $200 less than they were when they were renting. And a lot of the opportunities with existing housing stock under the right set of circumstances can help them to get there. That means you have to be able to make cash, no contingency offers with no inspections. Well, families who are purchasing their first home need all the financing and inspection contingencies. And that's where the acquisition fund comes in. When a family closes with ACTS, this is the way the staff celebrates that victory to get more and more family into homeownership. That's our little celebration that we do whenever a family has their closing here at ACTS Housing. So our aim is to reverse the trend by starting with ACT's Homeownership Acquisition Fund and purchasing homes that would otherwise be purchased by investors. And then we're going to preserve them for home ownership. ACT's Homes was launched in 2022 as an acquisition fund that aims to purchase at least 100 single-family and duplex homes annually with cash, no contingency offers, and then make those homes available to our low to moderate income families. ACT's Homes is unique because it disrupts that predatory acquisition before it can reach the Milwaukee neighborhoods. The new initiative will require $11 million in philanthropic support to scale to this size, and it's designed to be self-sustaining through sales proceeds. ACT's Homes is a nonprofit with a separate board of directors and a task force that helps the staff steer its new launch. So let's take a look at the financial model that we use to approach this endeavor. This part isn't all that exciting, but I wanted to show you as much as I could about how we approach this venture in case your organization has similar goals. What we're looking at here is the operating budget, staffing, and income flow from operations to eventually get to the full funding that we needed to have to launch this initiative. With a fall 2022 start, we knew we would get to full staffing in 2023 and carry that staffing level into 2024. None of our models were adjusted to look at what it would take to produce more than 100 homes annually. We'll look at that if and when we get to the point of 100 homes and then thinking about going beyond. But since hiring the staff comes first, it was important to understand the staffing and fringe costs so that we could hire staff and build staffing costs into the overall acquisition model. This is a look at the per property cost of acquisition and the rehab of existing homes. We developed an acquisition strategy that calls for a mix of rehab levels ranging from minor, like $6,000 for those that need just a few repairs, to major at $42,000 for homes needing more substantive repairs. So two things I'm sure you've noticed in this model. One is there is not any interest figured into the funds to launch this initiative. We didn't think we needed to account for interest expenses because we are using philanthropic support. In hindsight, that was probably too optimistic, especially if you consider what it might mean to expand beyond 100 homes per year. The second thing you'll notice is that we were very clear that to deliver on the operating budget needs, an average gain of $7,500 is needed from each home. So we anticipate that some will be smaller, others larger gains, but on average, $7,500 is needed. Obviously, because we have other strategic priorities in play, it's entirely possible that we take on a home where we're not going to deliver $7,500, but it delivers on some other strategic objective with the organization. We also had to acknowledge that there's a need to move into a new space for ACTS, which is to consider the effect of owning properties that are occupied by renters. So we developed this model to understand how the finances would be impacted by holding properties that were occupied, where we'd be receiving rents, but we'd also have longer holding costs, more taxes to pay because we hold the properties longer, management of the properties, maintenance of the properties. So we had to put all of that into consideration as we thought about the finances around this fund. All of this brought us to the capital budget that would be needed to show the effect of recirculating funds. We have our $2 million that we need to raise through the capital campaign. With 2022 being the startup year, we would not see any recovery of funds through sales, as we'd be selling anything that we acquired in 2022 later in 2023. But the recovery through sales increases year over year, which gets us to fewer funding requests, and stable revenue recovery through sales. Armed with our business model, we launched a media fundraising campaign to bring attention to the initiative and attract funding. What was really surprising to us, to me especially, was how much this resonated with people, especially the part about out-of-state investors. It seems that the average citizen in the city was well aware of this out-of-state investment and the damage that it was doing to their neighborhoods. And so we got a lot of very positive response and support once we launched this acquisition fund. So shortly after launching in 2022, we started building the staff. Initially, we needed to have the staff on board, of course, in order to put together the full operation model. So we had a model, but we didn't have detailed processes and procedures. And that was the work that we needed to do as part of our first step in 2022, fall of 22, early 2023. To get ready to begin purchasing homes or working with the homes that we did acquire in 2022. But we didn't think we needed to bring all of the staff in. As you notice from the model that I showed you, there were a lot more positions than you're seeing on this flow chart. But we will add more rehab managers, more project managers, more transaction coordinators, as we grow and acquire more properties. So even though the team is still in training, we've worked with them to develop the business operational outline. So now we do have processes, procedures, and things in place. We have our data management system, process flows, and the various forms that we would need to operationalize this business and get it up and running. So our director of real estate oversees our business initiatives for the acquisition fund. The project manager is responsible for large scale rehab projects, those that typically would involve one general contractor who's responsible for the entire project. The rehab manager is responsible for the more small to mid-level rehabs that would typically involve managing multiple contractors who would work on each property. And then the transaction coordinator is really the heart of the whole thing because they handle all of the administrative tasks, all of the moving parts that come into play when you're acquiring and selling houses. So we need to make sure that all of our homes are in our system, that the data is accurate and correct. We need to turn utilities on, turn utilities off, process contractor payment requests, make sure we get all the proper signatures, submit those payment requests to accounting, make sure we have insurance on the properties and remove the insurance once we sell the properties. So all of the moving parts are done by the transaction coordinator. So that's really the heart of where everything goes into the transaction coordinator, who makes sure that all of the details get taken care of. One of the first things that we had to do as a group was to develop what we call our buy box. That gives our marketing team, a way to advertise to potential sellers and provide some information to help them determine if the property fits with Axe Homes. It also serves as a guide for our staff as they're inspecting properties for Axe Homes to purchase. Typically, we inspect any home we plan to purchase, but there are a few exceptions. We don't limit ourselves to any one source as far as acquiring properties is concerned. We have to engage in the market the same way the out-of-state investors are engaging. And that means that we have to be willing to purchase from the sellers that are active in the market. So far, we have primarily purchased from investors, private owners, NCST, and the city of Milwaukee and wholesalers. Those have been our primary sources so far, even though we're open to the other areas that are listed on my slide. We haven't developed a process to engage in some of the others, such as sheriff sales. So having a list of contractors was also important to our ability to quickly rehabilitate and sell homes. We hosted a couple of meet and greet sessions for contractors. It helps to have beer and food, just so you know. And it's really critical to schedule any kind of meet and greet or any kind of meeting you want to have with contractors at the end of their day or after their work day, because they're not likely to interrupt their work day to attend any type of events. And we also kept it short as far as any formal presentation. All we wanted to do was make sure that we shared what we do, our requirements, how they get paid, because timely payment is really a critical factor for many of the small business contractors. And if they're trying to work with a lot of programs, a lot of times programs want the contractors to wait 30 to 45 days for payment, but they really can't afford that because they're kind of working more. They have a smaller overall budget to work with, and they need to be able to be paid quickly. So after these 2 sessions, we had 80 contractors sign up with our organization, provided their license and insurance information in order to get bid opportunities. So we matched our licensing and insurance requirements to those that are required by the city, even though we do pay a lot faster. And then I'm not clear if you caught it in my introduction, but we rebranded the Acquisition Fund to Axe Homes for ease of identity in the community. Axe Acquisition Fund really doesn't speak to the community, but Axe Homes really says that that's what we're here for, to provide homes. So it's a name we'll use in advertising homes for sale to families and within the neighborhoods. Because of the unique structure of Axe Housing, we have 2 different paths that an Axe home might take. The top model is where we purchase and rehab a property before listing it for sale to a family who will purchase it and move right in on closing day. The second path is that we acquire a home and do little to no rehab on it before a family buys it. In this case, the family will complete the rehab with support from the Axe Lending Department. We need to be able to utilize both of these paths in order to reach the goal of 100 homes annually. It's not possible for us to reach 100 homes if we're rehabbing every home as an organization. So we need to have a healthy mix of those families who are purchasing a home that they will rehab. And then I wanted to try to give you a little bit of sense of how we do it, the details of what we do. So this is a sort of step-by-step of the process that we go through to purchase and rehab homes. Once a home is identified, a walkthrough is done by the project or rehab manager who developed that repair estimate so that a financial analysis can be completed. And I'll share that with you in just a bit. So if we feel the property fits our model, then an offer is submitted. Once accepted, the contractor bids are solicited and a bid opening awarding meeting is set up internally. Once we close on the property, the construction typically will begin the day of or day after closing. Each project is overseen by the rehab or project manager who visit the property at least weekly. We do have a 120-day turnaround set for each rehab. That's the maximum time that we want to hold the property before it's ready to be sold to a family. So once completed, the property is ready to list and made available to all families in the Axe pipeline, as well as families receiving HUD certified homebuyer education from other local homebuyer education agencies providing homebuyer education. So this is a snapshot of the system we set up to evaluate homes for purchase. After the purchase, this information is already in our system for use for our report, for other reporting and analysis of our progress. So what we're trying to get to is the maximum amount that we should pay for a property in order to meet the financial calculations goal that we had in that financial model initially. So we're trying to get to that number up front so that we know whether this is going to be a successful venture for us or not. And it helps us to understand what our maximum price is, so that if we choose to pay a different price, then we know that, okay, so we're going above what we think is the right maximum price. But let's make sure that we're making a decision that's going to be right for our organization and for the model or for the mission. So our results to date is that it takes a lot of property evaluations to result in actual homes acquired, which for us is 24 so far, at least as far as when this presentation was put together. So as you can imagine, this is a moving target and it changes every day. But this presentation, I had to put it together a little earlier, so our numbers have definitely changed, but it was 24 as of last week when I put this together. We only recently geared up to take more purposeful steps to acquire large-scale numbers of homes. So stay tuned for that. Right before I left for vacation, we got an accepted offer on a 10-property portfolio. So we're starting to increase our numbers pretty dramatically. So as I said, stay tuned. And this, as of the time that this presentation was produced, we had sold and closed on 3 properties. We have 6 under contract and 1 listed for sale. So I have a couple of snapshots of properties that we have purchased, rehabbed, and sold. So our very first property, which was a single-family ranch, we paid $90,000. We spent about $33,000 to fix it up. Had about just under $10,000 for holding costs on this property, and we sold it for $126,000. We did lose money. We lost just over $6,000 on this property, but the results turned out great, and the family got a great home. Second property that we purchased, and the first property we purchased through a wholesaler. So the second property that we purchased is also a single-family home. That's a 2-story. We paid $64,000 for it. We purchased this from the city of Milwaukee. The rehab costs were $71,000. So lower purchase price, much higher rehab cost. Our holding costs were about $7,500, and we sold the property for $150,000. This house did net the required $7,500 a goal for a home. And we really were happy with the results and how it all turned out. So what did we learn through this process? We learned that when the community sees that this nonprofit has raised millions of dollars to acquire homes, they think you're dumb money. Meaning that they think that they can sell houses to you for way more than they can get in the open market. And so part of it is that we're having to re-educate the investment community that we're not dumb money, that we're actually savvy, smart investors just like them. And we're looking to acquire properties that have opportunity in them as well. Evaluating portfolios take a lot of time. Very time consuming, especially if you're trying to look at every house. And it didn't take us long to realize that we had to evaluate portfolios on a desk review and base it on the property and the market value in order to make our offers, because it was impossible to look at every house in a portfolio, especially if you ended up not getting it. That's a lot of wasted resources that we realized we didn't really need to spend. Our staffing and positions and the timing of bringing roles on really changed from what we had in the model. The actual jobs that we needed, where we thought we needed more people that were like salespeople or brokers, we realized really we needed more like rehab managers and project managers. You must have a management and tracking system. They're essential, not only for your own analysis and understanding what's happening with the process, but also to be able to report out to your stakeholders. We had to be willing to streamline our processes and procedures. Like I said, when we started working with the portfolios, realized that, oh boy, this is not great. It takes too much time, and we quickly adjusted that and other processes. So when you're starting something new, especially something as complicated as this, and you've never done it, nobody else has ever done it, be willing to just quickly change if it looks like it's not working. Don't doggedly stay with it. The rehab costs way more than the model predicted. I don't think we've seen any rehabs under $30,000. And so that was one thing where the model predicted like our maximum rehab would be like $42,000. There's no way you could do a major rehab for $42,000. So that's just a reality that hit us pretty quickly. Ask questions and network. And so we're new in this whole investor space, and we needed to get close to we had to bring the enemy close and network and get our name out there. And that's how we started to get an inflow of notifications when there were portfolios available for purchase by investors, because most of those transactions are off market. So unless you're networking, getting to know people, you're not going to know when these sales are happening or available. Make sure your partnerships are in alignment with your goals as an organization and as a department. So we spent a lot of time trying to make a partnership work because it sounded like it was a good idea. But after spending quite a bit of time going back and forth and realizing that this was about the partners kind of getting what they needed, but it really was adding very little for us as an organization, but it would have required us to add a lot of complexity that we really didn't need at this juncture. And so we ended up not moving into that partnership. So not all partnerships are good. This was a partnership with the health department in the city, and it was about lead safety, which was all wonderful. And we felt like all of that fit with us, but because of their goal, they had some real requirements that would have put a choke on our progress. And so we had to decide that that wasn't good for us. We're open to collaborate, recalibrate the business model, which we did. We changed the positions, we changed when we bring them in. And then we had to adjust to the market. The market conditions are unprecedented, unpredictable, and nobody knows where it's going. But that's part of what you have to be ready for. Costs more to rehab houses. The purchase price of houses are a lot more than we thought. And so we're having to adjust to all of that. But we are still finding that we're having success. Right. And that is what I have to share with you. And I am definitely open to any questions that you have.
Thank you so much. That was incredible, Dorothy. And I know we talked about this earlier, but just the best practices that you've shared and the knowledge that you've shared, hopefully those that are attending the community impact briefing call today can take it and go back to their respective markets and or share with others as well. So thanks so much for that. It was incredible. So now we will open it up for some Q&A. Feel free to drop a question in the chat or the Q&A section of the webinar. And we have one that's just come in. This is from Aaron Green Wilson. What type of financing do your buyers use? Is FHA acceptable? If yes, are there any issues with flipping?
Yeah, so our buyers use all types of financing. If they're buying one of our rehab properties, definitely we accept FHA. We couldn't be a HUD certified housing agency and discriminating against HUD financing, but FHA is fine because our focus is always on safety, right? And so if we're working on a property, we make sure that we're taking lead safety precautions and managing those very well. And that's the main issue with FHA and HUD, is that they're interested in making sure that there are no lead hazards for the families who purchase homes with their financing. Other than that, we're rehabbing the property, so we're going to make sure it's in good condition.
Great. Thank you for that. We've got one more in the Q&A. This is from Marcia Berry Smith. What were some of your sources of funding, and did banks participate with CRA funds?
Yeah, so our sources of funding initial sources of funding was a local foundation. So they kicked in the first $1 million and that was to cover our operating expenses for the first 3 years. And then our second big contributor was Wells Fargo with a $2.5 million contribution. And I'm pretty sure they'll count that as under their CRA requirements or work. And then our other funding sources were other foundations. We got assistance from the city of Milwaukee as part of their ARPA funds. We got support from the Milwaukee County. They kicked in to help us get to $2.5 million to work toward our goal of the 11 million. Now we're still raising money. We don't have all the money, but that didn't mean that we shouldn't start, which is what we did.
Excellent. I was going to ask too, as part of the capital structure, if you had social impact investors. You mentioned, foundations, local foundations. Did any of them sort of come to the table with a program-related investment type of structure, or what is known as PRI?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I know if I understand the question.
Okay. Yeah, that's
but so we have we rolled out like this model, right? This is what we want to do. And then we typically want people to come and support what we've rolled out as the opportunity for them to do something, have an impact on home ownership among low to moderate income individuals. Now, all foundations, like, they have their own goals, right? And sometimes they have their own neighborhoods. I talked about how sometimes we'll make a decision that may not deliver the level of profit that we want, but it might deliver on other mission critical initiatives. And that would be one of them, right? If we were able to make a major contribution in a neighborhood that's important to the funders of our program, of our work, then we'd probably make that decision.
good point. Good point. Let me just see if, Chris, you have any questions. We've got, let's see, got another. Sorry, Chris, I know there's another question in the Q&A before I teed you up. Dave Maynard asked, did you develop your own home buyer coaching process internally, or did you partner with a third party?
It was created internally. So our home buyer coaching has been in place for, quite a while before I started working at AXE. We do use the NeighborWorks Compass system, but as far as our approach to home buyer education, it was developed internally.
All right, one more question here, just coming in. And this is from Julius Webb. Do you have to pay any investors a rate of rate of interest on your fund?
No, so that's what I mentioned, that,
Okay.
We're using philanthropic funds initially. So there's no interest, right? But as we think about, okay, when we get to the 100, what are we going to do? So, you always have to be thinking ahead. And as we're thinking ahead, we're thinking, well, we may be in a position where we will borrow and we'll find favorable sources of those funds. but we expect to have interest expenses in the future. But right now, our funds are all philanthropic.
What a great way to start. That's great. Another question, Marcia Berry Smith. What are the guidelines for the loan that ACTS Lending offers to buyers?
Yeah, so I don't know all the details, but what I can tell you is that one thing that is often a barrier to people is their credit score, right? And it has no credit score. So that's one of the guidelines. I know that when it comes to how recent your bankruptcy was, and some things like that, our time periods are shorter as far as the time between. And I think that some of the requirements from banks where they're real strict about where your money comes from and things like that, like we have a more generous way of viewing that. So if some people are paid in cash, and that's just a fact of life. And if you're not able to say, okay, can we recognize that is happening, that's a fact, then you can't, it's difficult to serve some people.
Yeah. Lots of flexibility, it seems there.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, probably one more question here, Dorothy. And this is also from Marcia. Last question. When a buyer takes a house as is there sweat equity considered?
So when a buyer takes a house as is, so even in that case, we make sure that they have the financing lined up to be able to take care of the repairs. And we make sure that we pair them with what we call a rehab coach, someone who's going to guide them through that process and make sure that all of the needed repairs get done. And all those repairs are around safety, sanitary, co-compliance, right? Because we want to make sure that we're putting families in a winning position. We're not, we don't want them to be in a bad position. Now, does that mean that can they do some of the work themselves? Absolutely. And if they're able and capable of doing the work themselves, that's absolutely allowable.
Oh, wonderful. Well, it sounds like it takes a lot of flexibility in being able to not only work with the capital, but also on the back end with the lending to make all of this work. And I'm sure it has been lots of lessons along the way. I would just like to say congratulations again to your organization, just your leadership, your board definitely have visionary thinkers, including yourself, Dorothy, and sometimes that's what it takes. The one thing that when I was preparing for our call and I just saw all the articles that, you know, were prompted because of the work that you were doing in Milwaukee is this term that the Wall Street Journal mentioned. And that was, and I love the term, by the way, it's the activist home flipper. So the nonprofits out there, you are activist home flippers. So you know, disruptors,
so.
whatever you call it. But I really like that term. And I think it exemplifies, of course, the work that you've done with your fund. And, you know, definitely good luck in continuing to be that partner in neighborhoods that helps to empower, you know, more families through the process of homeownership. So Dorothy, thank you so much for participating. We will be, of course, this is being recorded. We also will be sharing Dorothy's presentation with everyone. And we're going to leave a few more minutes now for Elizabeth Coates to join in. And Elizabeth, thank you for being here. I forgot to introduce you at the beginning, so my apologies. Elizabeth is our director of the Homeownership Alliance, and she is going to be providing some updates on the policy side of our work here at NCST and nationally. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Raquel and Dorothy. Thank you for sharing your story with us. It is so important to know what the work is being done on the ground, as those lessons learned need to be elevated to Congress and to the administration. And that practitioner-informed perspective is what shapes not only NCST's policy work, but as well as our budding trade association called the Homeownership Alliance. Some of you that have been on this call before are well aware of our work, and if not, I will go into it shortly. But first, we'll talk a little bit about some policy updates in the federal world that we are keeping our eyes on. The first is the Neighborhood Homes Investment Act. This was something that we've discussed last month, and you've probably heard my predecessor, Chris Sigmund, talk about it very often. So NCST, we are co-managers of the Neighborhood Homes Coalition. So we have a website that has all the information that you would need to know about what this legislation does, who is supporting it, what press hits that we've received, and some important tools to be able to enhance your advocacy. So just as a primer, the Neighborhood Homes Investment Act would create a tax credit for the purpose of new construction of homeownership as well as rehab in distressed areas wherein we see that value gap that so many of our community buyers are experiencing, to be able to just provide that little bit of an edge and private-public partnership to be able to increase the number of affordable owner-occupied units in our country. So the Senate has reintroduced that legislation earlier this year. And the most exciting update on that is that the House has followed suit. This is not something that's very common to have identical legislation introduced in a split Congress. So we feel very reassured with the bipartisan support that we are seeing. So we have a press release that the Neighborhood Homes Coalition has put forth that we'll share in the chat as well. Another very exciting development that has kind of been in inconsistent updating, thanks to our great data team here at NCST, are the Neighborhood Homes Coalition interactive maps. So we'll put a link to that in the chat as well. That is where you can go and zoom into the census tract or the service area where it is that you provide the important community services and housing and whatever else it is you're doing, to be able to show those shaded areas in blue are the eligible census tracts wherein this tax credit can be used. Not only can you search it by census tract, you can also search by congressional district. This is very important when we are doing our advocacy. So those of us that are a part of the Neighborhood Homes Coalition, we keep this front and center whenever we're interfacing with Congress members and their staffs. And we also encourage any member that is attending here, any community buyer, any partner of NCST in the Homeownership Alliance, to keep this handy. So whenever it is that you run into a member of staff or a member of Congress on the Hill, that you can let them know this is exactly how this piece of legislation will impact our community and your constituents. So we encourage your engagement online on the website. If you want more information, there is a field wherein you can let us know who you are, what your interest or stake might be with the Neighborhood Homes Investment Act. We're always looking to be able to engage broader community partners outside of the Beltway to press our members of Congress to really hold this as a high priority. So that's Neighborhood Homes, and happy to answer any questions at the end should you have them. We'll also talk a little bit about the Down Payment Toward Equity Act. So this is Congresswoman Waters. She is the ranking member of the Financial Services Committee on the House side, and she has reintroduced legislation providing $100 billion in direct assistance to help first-generation home buyers purchase their first home. NCST has signed on to this legislation as we believe there is not only a supply issue that we are seeing, but also opportunities to support the demand for this group of folks that perhaps do not depend on the bank of mom and dad to be able to own their first home. I am one of those people, so I absolutely am very interested in seeing how Congress seeks to expand this important resource of down payment assistance. So we'll move finally to two rulemaking items, which are not nearly as interesting. I suppose it could be depending on who you are. There's not always a lot of drama surrounding rulemakings, but it's still a very, very important component. One being the long-awaited Home Investment Partnership Program. So I don't want to overpromise anything, because if you click on the link that we've provided, that links to the regulations page that the federal government provides, you'll see a date of when the proposed rulemaking is supposed to hit live. It says 12/00/2023. What does that mean? Your guess is frankly as good as mine. My understanding is that the Office of Management and Budget, the budget office within the White House, as well as the respective agencies in this regard, it would be HUD. They don't want to pigeon themselves into a deadline too narrowly. So if they blow past the 12/00/2023, they'll say, oh, well, it's our intent to get something out for the public to respond to by the end of the calendar year. However, that is probably the most specific that I've heard had be on the potential of a home regulation reform for at least the past 5 or 6 years. And many of you may understand the difficulties that the Home Investment Partnership has in being able to be utilized for homeownership purposes. That's absolutely a regulatory priority for us at NCST and at the Homeownership Alliance. We'll be keeping close eye on that. And finally, I will just flag the Federal Housing Finance Agency has a request for input on their single family pricing model. Some of you all might have seen lots of different elements in the news and frankly, lots of different misinformation on what FHFA's intentions are with this new pricing system. NCST and the Homeownership Alliance, we will both be submitting comment that is informed by our members and our community buyers. So I encourage you to take a look at that request for information and let us know what issues we might need to be able to elevate when we respond to that RFI. And finally, I'll just do a little pitch on the Homeownership Alliance. We are a group of 30 nonprofit organizations. NCST, we are the managing organization of the Homeownership Alliance, and we are looking to expand our advocacy scope for affordable homeownership. We've got lots of different focus areas across different groups that focus on rental or might focus on rural, but we really did feel that there was a niche to be filled on affordable homeownership. So that is the purpose of the Homeownership Alliance. I am the managing director of the Alliance, so if you are interested in learning more, please reach out to me. Raquel will put my information in the chat. Again, this is how I believe policy recommendations should be filtered up to our federal government. Any lobbyist can come in with all of their lists and all of their footnotes on what some constituent may or may not have done. Instead of, I want to amplify the voices wherever I can, but most importantly, I want to be able to pass the mic. And if you're not in the room to pass the mic, then I'm not doing my job right. So it's really very important for us to be able to elevate your recommendations and your interactions with federal programs. And the Homeownership Alliance seeks to do just that.
Elizabeth, all I can say is, wow, we have a lot of things that we are working on, and this was a jam-packed session today. So I know I did list a lot of, or help provide some links here in the chat. We will make sure that when we send out the recording and the presentation from Dorothy, that we have all of those links captured again for folks to make it easy. So thanks everyone for joining today. Enjoy your start of summer, and please join us again in July for our NCST Community Impact Briefing on the 19th. Be happy to see you then. Take care and have a great rest of the week. Thanks.